Everyone, please welcome into the Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame, Alanis Morissette!
Do I stress you out? My sweater's on backwards and inside out, and you say how appropriate. I don't accept everything today. I don't mean to pick you apart, you see, but I can't.
Thank you so much, Olivia. I have hope for the future with Olivia on this planet. Artistically speaking and characterologically too. Thank you for the sweet words you just said. I was really young when I started writing, and there's a book I have at home that is one of those questionnaire books that basically said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I remember the first thing I wrote when I was 6 was I wanted to be a writer. And I thought being a writer would be great. I could just stay in sweatpants for the rest of my life. But then the singing thing caused trouble. But I don't want to be too precious about what it is to songwrite, because there is an element of songwriting that is really not precious and very stream of consciousness. You know, my kids run around the house just basically singing to me, and instead of talking with me, I'll ask them how their day was and they'll sing for an hour, which is awesome. I do hit record sometimes, singing to my lapel. But yeah, the other things that I wanted to be was a singer, a dancer, an actor, and a nurse. So all those essential qualities squished into one archetypal role. I'll take it. The songwriting process for me is just so hyper-present. It's like a receptivity muscle that has to be cultivated, because I hate writing, by the way. It's the worst. So when I sit down to write, it's that sort of daunting torture, excitement, giddiness, and it's incumbent upon me to just stop and listen and then hear it, heed it, write it, share it. So when I write it, it's for me, but then when I share it, it's yours. It's everyone else's to interpret as they will. I've heard some interesting interpretations that I love. This one woman came out to me and she said, "I love that song you wrote about being in love with your lesbian teacher." And I said, "Well, which one? Because there were a few hot ones." So at that point, it's not up to me to correct anything. It's a song that is made yours at that point. And contrary to the popular belief that strife is the only thing that can feed inspiration, I find that what we are as writers and songwriters specifically is we mark things. We mark a feeling that's intangible and really hard to describe. So in some ways, I feel like I'm marking and putting into words, and sometimes rendering pithy, something complicated, or distilling it. You know, in some ways I just feel like a distiller. So, and the best part about songwriting for me is being in a room and feeling safe. So there are a few people I want to acknowledge for having provided that safe space and safe context to express. The people I'm about to describe they didn't have an agenda as such. They didn't want to impose who they thought I should be onto me. They were just a listening and a quality of openness and curiosity, which is so juicy. One of my favorite people in the whole world is Tim Thorney. R.I.P. Tim. What was so inspiring about interacting with Tim was the big question that was held out to me in my meeting him was, well, who are you? What do you want to write about? What's going on for you? You know, and I just thought, well, there it is. Just an open space to hold. You know, a lot of people ask me if their children, you know, what should my child do to become a songwriter? And I said, just write. Write about the splinter, write about the day at school, write about how you don't know what you want to write about. Yeah, so Tim Thorney, thank you for holding space and loving me. And I remember after Jagged Little Pill, after the tour for Jagged Little Pill ended, I came up here to Toronto to spend time with Tim, because he was the ultimate port in a storm with the follow-up record. We were talking backstage how fun the follow-up record is with a record that's well received. And I remember thinking, I don't really want to write. And I told Tim that. I said, I don't want to write right now. And he said, everyone else, when I'd said that, they'd say, well, you have to. It's an imperative. it's your responsibility, you know. And when I said it to Tim, he just said, all right, let's go watch a movie. Let's go get some sandwiches. And of course, I started writing my follow-up record to Jagged Little Pill that night because of that freedom. So thank you, Tim, for that and so many other things that I'll share at some point. Lindsay Morgan, Darlene Morgan, his wife, is here tonight. Lindsay, I sent a tape to Lindsay when I was 10 years old of a song that I had written just for the sake of sharing it with him, a beautiful artist. He's no longer with us in the body either, so. So I sent him the song, and when I went to visit him next time, he had produced the entire track based on what I had sent him. And I said, well, this is amazing, but who's gonna sing it? Because my brothers tell me that I can't sing. And he laughed, and he just goes, just get in there. So I sang my first song and recorded it at 10, and I wanted to get a record deal at that time, but nobody wanted to sign me because I was a child. Whereas now they want to sign you, they'll curl up the uterus and get your signature. So I started a record company with Lindsay Morgan entitled L'Amour, based on our last names. And that's where I had a taste of what it was to imagine something, to hear a full-fledged song. I would hear songs in my dreams. I was exactly sort of the cliche of papers and napkins and everything everywhere, still am. And then I realized that this was something that you could actually turn into a career, that there might be some value in asking a 3-year-old or a 6-year-old what they love, because that might portend for what the passion is in the future that could be integrated into a career. And I know I am privileged, I am so privileged to be able to do what I do, and that there were so many incredible opportunities to my left and right as I moved along, and I'm really grateful for that. Glenn Ballard. Yes. Again, I had co-written with a lot of people. I love writing alone, but I'm a relationship person, so I love the back and forth, 1 + 1 = 500. So I had met several writers, some of whom had agendas. It just wasn't the right chemistry, whatever the reasons were. And when I met Glenn, I went into his studio, and we just wrote a song called The Bottom Line in about 11 minutes. And I just thought, wow, okay, this person doesn't have any preconceived notions about where I've been musically since I was a child. He just is providing space for me to speak into it, a quality of listening. So thank you, Glenn, for being an artist's producer and for writing with me and just laughing and being such a philosopher. I live for it. I think archetypally artists are social activists by default. You know, we're commenting, we're chronicling, we're marking. And in my case, I love being able to provide, and this is what made me continue in my career, because the circumstances surrounding Jagged Little Pill and all that came with it was very heady, and I wasn't sure my constitution would want to tolerate that moving forward. The many intelligences that it takes for us writers to show up, you know, the muscles, it's an Olympic event, really. For me, it's like hooking into an IV and just letting it all come out. And I remember with Glenn, I asked him after we wrote You Ought to Know, I said, okay, well, we're gonna have to revisit that because it's gotta change a couple things. And he said, well, what would you want to change? And I said, well, I don't know about the F-bomb in the middle of it all. And he said, well, did you mean that? And I said, of course I meant it. I'm a truck driver. And he said, okay, let's keep it. And I said, okay, let's keep it. So that was a small example of his holding. Yeah, so many people supported me on so many levels in terms of being in the public eye and being able to show up. But in terms of supporting the actual songwriter, I think when someone supports the songwriter, they're supporting the person. So these people I just mentioned really supported me as a human being, and I thank my parents for just being a giant yes to my expressing myself constantly, being highly sensitive, being an empath, and then my dad prepping me by saying, well, sweetheart, some people are gonna really love you, some people are gonna really hate you, and most people won't give a shit. Thank you, Father. Yeah. So, yeah, I just am so grateful to be here, basically. Yeah, and just the sanctity of being able to first write for myself and have it be a safe, uncensored expression, and then the invitation on tour or in general to invite people in to define themselves in accordance to it. That's why artists are activists. Anything, so just permission to feel ma'am, permission to feel rage and fear and horror and joy and glee and boredom and all those yummy, juicy parts. And all these parts of us as humans, these parts of me are able to communicate, and they have their moment in the sun. And it just keeps this system cooking along really well. So thank you, everybody here. Thank you, Canada. Are you kidding me? I love you so much. And I just want to thank each person who's ever supported me as a writer. There were some people that were surprised I could write. And those who knew from day one, especially with this special poem that I wrote when I was 6. It's sort of this, I'll end on this. This is just a little harbinger or portending of what was to come. It's called Lungs. This is when I was 6, first song, and it was recorded, by the way, I'm horrified to say. Some lungs aren't nice to look at, especially the ones of a cat. We have to live with them and breathe, and life is part of living with air. All of us have to be fair and share. We do. Be nice to your lungs. Talk to it. It feels like you just came out of a pit because you can share your feelings with it. We all know lungs can't talk or walk. Don't pretend it's just a metal object like a lock. You might say bad words and get in heck. Why not study lungs in science, in tech? Anyway, if that's not the birth of a legend, I don't know what is. Anyway, I love you so much. Bless you. Congrats, everybody.